Hello, and welcome to Change My Mind podcast. I haven't made a podcast for a few days now because I was doing coffee shop philosophy, and as a result of COVID-19, obviously all the coffee shops are closed, so I can't even get a decent cup of coffee. Never mind, do coffee shop philosophy. So, but between my last podcast and today, I'm after getting a masterclass in podcasting from Blind by Boatman, and I hope that my podcasting will have improved significantly as a result. Today, I'm going to talk about objective reality and what is objective reality, because in order for me to give my opinion on the cause of COVID-19 and maybe suggest a cure for COVID-19, I first have to explain what is objective reality in order to lay a foundation for my reasoning. I was listening to a friend of mine the other day on a different podcast, Anthony Tony Bernelli, on American Real. Now, Anthony is my first mentor. He's an amazing man, and he was explaining what reality is. Now, Anthony does transcendental meditation, and he has a subjective realism would be his school of thought. Now, we might differ that way, but he was doing a great job of explaining reality. But what was interesting was to listen to somebody on a higher level of consciousness trying to explain to people in the cheap seats what reality was. And Anthony was my first mentor, and it was a great interview. It was a great podcast. But what I learned from it was that I'm better off, in my attempt to try and explain what objective reality is, I'm better off to use my journal and read from my journal. Because if I don't read from my journal, I'm going to go off on all sorts of tangents. Once we go down the rabbit hole, I'm going to be like Nicky Loudon. My voice will start to increase. I'll start to lose the run of myself. My voice will start to increase. I'll be going left down this tunnel, right down this tunnel, and you're never going to stay with me. But if I read from my journal, I'm going to try and keep the whole thing on a level where hopefully I can keep my speech steady so that as many people as possible can understand me, and I won't lose the run of myself. Hopefully my objective today is as many people as possible actually understand me, because a lot of what happens in these podcasts and with philosophy and even religions is people pretending they understand. And then when they pretend they understand, it becomes an accepted truth because they explain to somebody else and somebody else pretends they understand, and you have the blind leading the blind, and then these things become objective truths, but nobody really knows what's going on, and we get further from reality as is, if you know what I mean. So what I'm trying to explain today is hopefully you can all understand exactly what we're going to break down is exactly what reality is. Objective reality, subjective reality. But today we're going to do objective reality. And I hope to be able to explain it in a manner that you can all stay with me and everybody understands. So I'm going to read from my journal in order to do this. What is objective reality? What reality is what is reality is a massive topic in philosophy, and several great works have been written on the subject with different labels applied to different schools of thought, such as idealism, subjective idealism, realism, and so on. Several different schools of thought. Kant was trying transcendental idealism. Today I'm going to explain it. Subjective realism believes that there is no matter. Reality is a construct of the mind. It only exists when it is perceived. In other words, anybody who does quantum physics will often try to say that tree doesn't exist until we are actually looking at it. There is no reality. Matter does not exist. That tree does not exist until there is an observer. For example, the Buddhists believe that the self is an illusion, and this is supported by quantum physics, in that everything is energy. And everything is energy, but I'll explain this. An atom, for example, is 99.99% space, and frequency is in waves. Frequency, everything is energy, and frequency is in waves. But when observed, a wave becomes a particle, because it's like, did you ever touch a slug? Did you ever touch a slug and he contracts? That's like a wave. When you observe a wave, it retracts into a particle. So when you observe a wave, it becomes a particle. You know, a slug is a good analogy to use. If you touch a slug, he rolls into a ball. You know, so that's like a wave. A wave contracts into a particle when it's observed. Now, so in theory, this makes perfect sense. Do you know what I mean? If an atom is 99.9% space, and a wave, once you look at it, retracts into a particle. So in other words, everything is energy, and everything is an illusion, if you know what I mean. And it only becomes matter when it's observed by the observer. And in theory, if you were to break it down like that, that makes perfect sense. The reality is an illusion, that the self is an illusion. Until you apply Zeno's paradox. And that's where they're going wrong in quantum physics. They're not applying Zeno's paradox. Because nature, there's no one thing in nature. There is no everything is energy and that is it. Nothing is that simple. Nature is all binaries. It's duality and free will, but it's all binaries and paradoxes. So what you have to do is you have to apply Zeno's paradox. So to that information about the atom, about the frequency and the waves and the particles, you have to apply Zeno's paradox. Now, I'm not going to go into Zeno's paradox because anybody who does philosophy will know what Zeno's paradox is and can apply it themselves, and anybody who's interested enough can look up Zeno's paradox. Because if I go into Zeno's paradox, as I say, we're rallying off down to a different rabbit hole. So I'm going to leave Zeno's paradox to ye, but we'll just agree. That's what you have to apply to that information is Zeno's paradox. Now, as I say, I'm not going to explain Zeno's paradox because it would take me off an abstruse tangent outside the comprehension of most people. Now, as I say, anybody else can Google it if they so wish. But basically, that brings us back to where everything is energy, but a distinction ought to be made between matter and energy. Matter is energy in a solid form. Matter is energy stored in a solid form. We are matter. Actually, we are organic matter. That's what we are, organic matter. And obviously this tree is organic matter. But for instance, the plastic in this bottle would not be organic matter. But that's just matter. Even though matter is in solid form, everything is in a constant state of flux. It is constantly changing from one state to another, even though that may not be apparent to the naked eye. This is as a result of opposing forces. For example, if I leave metal outside, it oxidizes due to its interaction with moisture and air. So if you leave metal outside, as solid as metal is, it will eventually break down into rust and it will completely decompose over a period of time, but not apparent to the naked eye, but it is still in a constant state of flux as a result of opposing forces. So everything is in a constant state of flux. Are you with me on this part? So I hope I've explained that properly, that now you can understand why everything is in a constant state of flux. Even though some things take much longer time than others. Change is the only constant. Now, the nature of change is determined by the nature of forces, and we can impact on the nature of change by changing any of the variables which cause change, which bring about change. Do you understand this part? I won't repeat anyway. For example, now so as many people as can understand this as possible, I want to make this explain this in as simple as matter as possible, so as many people as possible understand it. For example, this potato is organic matter. It's cells. This potato is organic matter. If I leave this potato on the counter here, it will decompose. It'll break down over time. It'll decompose. It'll rot. If I take this potato outside, which we are outside, and I wrote this last night, it will grow into I plant it. If I take this and plant this, if I plant this potato and water it, it will grow into a plant and multiply. There are a number of variables in the process, including sunlight, involved in that process from this potato growing into a plant. Once I change its environment, so I can determine its environment, I can leave it on the counter and let it decompose. So I can make a number of choices in relation to that determine the nature of change of this potato. For instance, I can determine the nature of change in that I can leave it here on the counter and let it decompose, or I can plant this potato. So I can choose to change this potato's environment, and this will be changing the variables that bring about the nature of change. Are you with me? Now, but there are a number of processes that are involved, a number of in the nature of change. There are a number of variables involved in the process of the nature of change should I plant this potato. Electromagnetism, so we have the soil and the water and the nutrients in the soil. They are all conducive to the nature of change in growing this potato into a plant and in turn multiplying. But electromagnetic radiation is one of the variables. For instance, like the sunlight. The sunlight is nuclear energy. The sun is really a nuclear reactor, an organic nuclear reactor. So sunlight is electromagnetic energy, and that is one of the variables that involved in the nature of changing this potato into a plant and in turn multiplying. Should I choose to change it in that manner? Now, if I put this potato in the microwave and I bomb it with radiation, I'm going to get a different result. Now, obviously, I don't have to explain what that is. I'm going to cook the thing and eat. Well, cook it. But can you understand? Are you still with me? So what I'm trying to explain here is if I change the environment and I change the variables that bring about the nature of change, I can determine or can control the nature of change. And the more knowledge I have, the more I can determine the nature of change. For instance, if I have good knowledge about what nutrients to put in the soil, how much sunlight to give it, everything else, I can grow a lovely potato plant. The same as growing weed. If I have the more knowledge I have about growing weed, the better weed I'm going to grow. But electromagnetism is a variable, a huge variable in growing weed. Everybody who grows weed knows that you have to get the hours of light right, and then the nutrients in the soil. But let's not go off on one of those tangents. Are you with me still about changing the variables? It's important you stay with me. Now the elephant. Now we're getting into put on the waders. We're going deep. We're going deep now. Now, the elements provide the foundation of our objective reality. We're all made of stars. So do you know what I mean? Carbon, the elements, carbon being one, oxygen, all the elements in the periodic table. They're all the same elements that make up us. We're all made of stars. We're all composed of the same stuff, matter. So that's why I say we're all made of stars. The periodic table provides the foundation of our objective reality. So do you with me on that? And the four fundamental forces of nature are gravitational force, weak nuclear force, strong nuclear force, and electromagnetic force. So what objective reality is matter in a constant state of flux that is in a constant state of flux, and that change is determined by the four fundamental forces of nature. Are you with me? Have you got that part? So now we've made a distinction between matter and energy, and we have now all went on to define matter. That matter that is composed of the elements, because the elements provide the foundation of our objective reality. So that's the elements provide the foundation of our objective reality, but it's in a constant state of flux as a result of opposing forces, and those opposing and a lot of variables that impact on the nature of change of the elements of our objective reality is the four fundamental forces of nature: gravitational force, weak nuclear force, strong nuclear force, and electromagnetic force. Now, so if you're with me on this so far, you can understand that we are organic matter, and the four fundamental forces of nature impact on our nature of change, the impact on our cells, on our thoughts, I'm not going to go down the tangent of the lower and higher animal, but electromagnetic forces, for instance sunlight, does affect our thinking and our thought processes. Because right, we'll stay on track. That's the idea of me reading from the book in the first place. Now, those fundamental forces are also in a constant state of flux, because they are not only determined by our position in orbit around the sun, but also by our orbit in the solar system. So there's two orbits. Do you know what I mean? So the four fundamental forces of nature are in a constant state of flux because they change according to our orbit around the sun and our solar system's orbit in the Milky Way galaxy. So our orbit in the galaxy. So two orbits. And that means that the four fundamental forces of nature are also in a constant state of flux. So if the four fundamental, back to changing the variables. So if the four fundamental forces of nature, those variables are in a constant state of flux, and that's impacting on the elements, the foundation of our objective reality. Our objective reality is in a constant state of flux, but it's matter impacted on by the four fundamental forces of nature. So everything is in a constant state of flux. Now, I'm half tempted here to go down the rabbit hole of our thought processes. I will. I'm going to leave this down for a second. So as we're organic matter, I'll come to that in a second. And that is why we'll stay with the book, because as tempted as I am to go down these rabbit holes, I'm gonna let's hold the line, as I say. Let's hold the line. And that's why the thinking of the collective consciousness changes. For example, it has just changed at the turn of the century as we move from the age of physics, the age of Pisces, into the age of Aquarius. Did you get that? So the thinking of the collective consciousness changes because the variables that cause the nature of change are in a constant state of flux. The organic matter that it impacts on us, basically, and everything else around us, is also in a constant state of flux. But can you understand how opposing forces are now impacting on each other? One impacting on the other. And that's why the thinking of the collective consciousness changes. And due to our position in orbit, and that's why just before the turn of the century, about 1966 to be exact, around then, the thinking of the collective consciousness started to change. The personality of the collective consciousness changes. Now, because we're going from the age of the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius, because everything is interconnected, and this is why the Byzantine Empire and the Macedonian Empire and the Mongolian Empire all used celestial globes, because everything is interconnected. They all understood this science, and they all understood the nature of change, and that's why they used celestial globes in order to be able to determine the nature of change, and that's how they were able to build these massive empires. Do you understand? We'll stay on track. Now, as there is a finite number of gene codes, objective reality stays the same unless we evolve. Do you understand that? And this is why Marcus Aurelius said, all that has to come has gone before. The second orbit around the planet, the first orbit takes what we determine as a year. Now, time is relative, and I'll break this down in another podcast, but time is relative. And the second orbit, the orbit of our solar system in the Milky Way, takes 230 million years. So everything that has to come has gone before, and that's why I say we are simply flowers in spring. You know, our extinction is inevitable unless we evolve. And the only way, anyway, and that is why, if you have stayed with me up to now, and if you actually put some effort into this and think about this, you will understand why history repeats itself. Because if there's a finite number of gene codes, and those gene codes are reused, and in that finite number of gene codes, there's only a certain number of them are infinite. So in a finite number of gene codes, there is only a certain amount of them are infinite, and in those infinite amounts, they continue. It's an eternal reoccurrence, if you know what I mean. But they can evolve, and that's why it's Nietzsche said it's an eternal reoccurrence, because those gene codes are reused. So really, our objective reality does not change, because the elements of which we are a part and the gene codes which the same gene codes are used means that the objective reality does not change. And that's why all that has to come has gone before, because it's all impacted on by as I explained, the four fundamental forces of nature, which are determined by the two orbits. So all that has to come has gone before. Are you with me? So if we learn how to sequence this, and that's what the Byzantine, the other, and the Macedonian, the Mongolian empires were doing, they understood the nature of change. The Chinese the same. The Qing dynasty, they were the same. They understood the nature of change, and that's how they build these dynasties, or these dynasties, if you like. You know. Anyway, I'm going off bad. Now, and that's why history repeats itself, as I say, and it will continue to do so unless we make the unconscious conscious. So do you understand that? So if we understand the nature of change, if we understand now, as I have explained it to you, if you can grasp what is our objective reality, if you can grasp what I have just explained to you, And we can then start, once we understand the variables, we can actually start to, to, to control the variables. Do you know what I mean? And we do this by making the unconscious conscious. And that starts with each and every individual learning to control the variables, because everything must start with the individual. Because we live in an electromagnetic field, and we're organic matter living in an electromagnetic field. So if we can start to make the unconscious conscious by learning to control the variables, which I will explain now in a second, we can determine our own fate. We can determine the nature of change. Do you understand me? That's why this is so important. Now, we'll continue. Now, hopefully you're still with me, because I can come back on this in another podcast again, and we can because we are not going to go OTT on the nature of change in relation to changing our inevitable extinction. I'm going to now go down the path of changing the variables in relation to the individual, because that's where everything must start. So I'm going to go back to my journey. Now that I have established that changing any variables that contribute to the nature of change, I would like to use it to explain the coronavirus. We won't go there yet. We won't go to the coronavirus yet. Now, I decided to take a different. I decided to go left instead of right. Now that I hope we have established, by changing the variables that affect the nature of change, we can learn to start controlling it. We can do this by focusing on what is within our control. For example, whereas our bodies are not up to us, the choices that we make in relation to them are within our power. Do you understand this? Our bodies are not up to us. For instance, like if I get sick, I can't help this. It's a dispreferred indifferent. But if it happens, I'll deal with it. I can make choices in relation to it. I can choose how I respond. Do you know what I mean? So our bodies are not up to us, but the choices that I make in relation to the choices that we make in relation to our bodies are up to us. It's very important that you understand that. And we can do this by focusing on what is within our control. Now, so what we control is we can control the environment. So for instance, if we have a virus, if we get the virus in our body, we can control the environment. Do you know what I mean? We can choose how to respond. But what is within our control is the environment. We're a host for this virus. We're a host for different little we're a host for this virus, so we can start learning to we can control the environment. Now, first of all, I would like to explain. We'll go back now and explain. Now that I've explained how matter is impacted on by opposing forces, I'll now explain what I believe is the cause of the coronavirus, and then I will explain what we can do and how we can respond in relation to it. Wuhan is the first fully 5G city. No matter how small corporations believe the change to be no matter how small corporations believe the change to be, they are changing the electromagnetic field. Everything is relative, and when it is questioned they replied, oh, it doesn't affect our immune systems. And that's great for us. It doesn't affect our immune systems, because that's a big problem in humanity. We can't see past ourselves. We think that everything is for us. Everything is all about us. Everything's for us. Oh, humans, we're top of the food chain, and all this is laid on just for us. And that's a big egotistical problem, because the universe has as much regard for the life of an oyster as it does for the life of a man. So what we need to do is lose the sense of entitlement, this egotistical view that we're the be all and end all of everything, because we are in our arse. Now, there are lots of other life forms that a lot of us are completely oblivious to them. But a lot of these little life forms, for instance, they feed off us. Your bed is full of dust mites that eat your dead skin, and you don't see them. But get a microscope and look at and take some dead skin cells from your bed, and you'll see loads of little dust mites that feed off them. So your bed is full of dust mites that feed off your dead skin, loads of little small creatures that crawling around in your bed you can't see. And you get into that every night and they eat you. We have microorganisms in the gut. We have microorganisms in the gut that can determine our behaviour. For instance, these microorganisms, depending on what microorganisms you cultivate, because we determine the environment. For instance, if you give them sugar, this is why sugar is addictive. If you give them sugar, you will cultivate microorganisms that will demand sugar. They'll demand sugar all the time. And this is why sugar is addictive. But once you actually break the habit, you can cultivate a different environment which will breed different microorganisms that will nearly find sugar repugnant. They nearly go, oh, sugar, oh. You know what I mean? They won't want sugar. They want good food. So this is what I mean by you can control the environment, and by controlling the environment, that's a variable in you controlling the nature of change in yourself. It's back to the nature of change. Everything's about understanding the nature of change. But it must start with the individual. Now, our cells are also, one cell is a living organism, and they all work in unison to dictate that your nature, what you do. That what makes your nature, your genetic code, your genetic composition. But these cells die and turn over. So, for instance, if we go to the gym, we're all cells are dying, and we're regenerating new cells. Depending on how we feed it, depends on the nature of change. Depends on the type of cell you create. Depends on the type of exercise you do, and the type of food that you eat will determine the nature of change. So you can, by controlling the environment, you are controlling the nature of change. Anybody who has ever done any partying will know that we can control the nature of change, and there are a number of variables when it comes to control. There are a number of variables when it comes to controlling the nature of change. Our thought processes are one very, very important part of it, because by controlling our thought processes, we can control our emotional and physical environment, our emotional and physical states. We can control this by our thought processes. One huge variable, by taking control of our thought processes. And the other one then is any partying, and anybody who's ever done any partying will tell you, when it comes to determining the nature of change, we can hugely determine our physical and emotional states by what we put in here and up here. If you snort cocaine, look at how that will determine the nature of change. It will affect you emotionally and physically. By just putting in different molecules. Organic matter. Cocaine is organic matter. And that will bring around significant change in a very short time. But you, in fact, by changing the variables, are determining the nature of that change. By controlling the variables that you put in here and up here. Now, so where are we? Yeah. So there are single cellular organisms and bacteria that we have to have a symbiotic relationship with in order to survive. And that's what, if you'll often hear me referring to the lower animal, if you allow your actions and your environment and your thought processes and your actions to be determined by the microbacteria in your gut and your 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 cells, your genetic nature, then you're if you're acting on instinct basically, because they all work on instinct. Your genetics work on instinct. So if you're acting on instinct, for instance, I want instant gratification. That's acting on instinct. Lust is acting on instinct. And when you're acting on instinct, that's listening to the lower animal. You're acting on instinct. And then when you allow your thought processes and your actions to be determined by the higher animal, by your electromagnetic field, that's the higher animal determining the nature of change. But when you control the nature of change, that's the seventh level of consciousness. That's you. That's you taking control. The seventh level of consciousness, the prefrontal cortex. That's what your prefrontal cortex is from. But that's another. We can go into all that in another podcast. We'll go down all these rabbit holes in time. Let's hold the line, as they say. Now, so we have to have a symbiotic relationship with all these little microorganisms that we are completely oblivious to. The little microorganisms in the gut, the little dust mites in the bed, everything. And viruses are another organism. They're a life form, really, because it's a microscope, a very, very minute. That's why a virus is a microscope, a little micro. Anyway. Now, so we have to have a symbiotic relationship with it, homeostasis. And that's what I'm trying to explain, that there's a finite amount, we'll go into that again, finite amount of consciousness. But now, so hopefully now, if we apply empathy, that we can now realise that all these little microorganisms have as much right to life as we do. Everything. And that's what the Buddhists mean when they say respect for life. Not this thing of engaging chemical warfare on them just because it's to our benefit. You know, we're waging war, and we're declaring war on complete life forms with all these vaccines. So if we bring in a vaccine, we're declaring war on a life form, on all our bleaches and all our chemicals. That's chemical warfare. And as I'll explain in another podcast, what we do to lower life forms, mind will do to us. But I'll explain that in another podcast. Now, so if you can understand that everything is relative, can you now maybe begin to understand that by changing the variables, how much of an impact that will have? Never mind our immune system, but can you imagine by changing the variables, such as changing the whole electromagnetic field in a city, in a whole city, as Wuhan is the first 5G city. So changing the whole magnetic field in a city, can you imagine how much it must impact on these little small life forms? Can you imagine that they have to mutate? Because where it's relatively of a minute change to us, to them it's massive. It's like look at the impact that the recent storms had on us. We button down the hatches and we off because of the elements and forces of nature. These storms. Look at the impact that had on us. We all cower into the houses and batten down the hatches. It's like that for them. We're changing their whole environment by changing the electromagnetic field, which is a huge variable in determining the life of the mutation of these viruses, these lower life forms. So, if you can understand that cause and effect, that every every action has a consequence. That's cause and effect. Every action has a consequence, or every effect has a cause as a result of opposing forces. So if for instance, as I say, if I bring about the nature of change in this potato, every effect has a cause, and the cause is changing the variables. So every variable I change is a cause, and it's going to cause a different effect. So every action has a consequence, and in order then to when we have mutations, when we have changes, what we really ought to be doing is tracing back our steps, because reverse engineer it. Because if every effect has a cause, what we have to do is reverse engineer it. Start stepping backwards and say, right, what variables have changed that would have caused this effect? And is that not simple reasoning? I hope this makes sense to you. I hope I have explained it in a way that this makes sense to you. That the only way to identify the cause is to reverse engineer it. So if we reverse engineer it, Wuhan is the first fully 5G city. So we have changed a huge variable in the nature of change, because, as I said, we live in an electromagnetic field, and the electromagnetic field is a huge variable in determining the nature of all of our organic matter. So as I say, it's a matter of re-engineering it. But instead of reverse engineering it, what the greedy scientists do is they're happy to crash the stock market, because, as I say, all that has come has gone before. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole today about the Templars and about the genetic codes, about sinking the ships. But basically, everything has gone before. This has all happened before. But for instance, the same genetic code, the Templars, the Freemasons, the Zionists, they used to sink the ships, basically. I'll come back to it in another podcast. But they seized the opportunity to sink the ships, because by crashing the market, they increased the divide between rich and poor. But they seized this opportunity to control the market in their interest. You know what I mean? So what they do is they don't reverse engineer and find the cause, because they are possibly well aware of the cause. But what they do is they work it to their interest. You know what I mean? So what they do in order to work it to their interest is capitalise on it and increase the divide between rich and poor by crashing the markets, taking everybody's pension fund, and then rebuild the market again slowly. But they have all the money, and that's what's causing the increase of the divide between rich and poor. So as a part of doing this, and a part of as social engineering, what they do instead of identifying the cause, is they treat the symptoms. And they do this, they treat the symptoms for cancer, for depression, for anxiety, for everything. All they ever do is treat the symptoms, and that's by design. Because in order to treat anything, you must first identify the cause. But in order to capitalise on the cause, you treat the symptoms. So the first thing they do, instead of identifying the cause, is to set about creating a vaccine, which gives Big Pharma more control, which gives the Zionists, the Freemasons, the control of that's how they can control the nature of change, but in their interest. So what I'm saying is, I hope you can understand what I'm saying. I hope I have give sufficient reason to identify the nature of cause, the cause of the coronavirus. Now, so as I say, treat the cause and not the symptoms. So the first start of treating the cause is say no to 5G. Turn off your 5G. And if everybody in China and Italy and everywhere are turning off their 5G, and turn off the 5G in the hospitals, because there's a lot of electromagnetism in the hospitals, the worst place you could be is hospital. That's the worst place you could be, is the hospital with the coronavirus, because this electromagnetism is the environment that has mutated into. Like, they talk about the mutation of the virus, but every time the virus, for instance, if the virus mutates from China to Italy, you're changing its environment. So naturally, it will mutate. The very same as when man mutated, when man changed his environment, for instance, moved from the continent of Africa to Europe, he mutated, our cells mutate, and that's why we have white men and black men and all different, but that's for another podcast. But I hope you can understand what I'm saying, and that's why the virus mutates. But by going into a hospital, you're providing the perfect environment for it to thrive in, because this is the environment that has been conducive to its mutation, to its creation in the first place. Now, so we'll now go on to, having identified the cause, I will now suggest what in my opinion, is the best way to cure coronavirus. No. I don't know if I have had coronavirus or not. I have had a bad cough and a deep chest infection, but I never got tested. And the reason I never got tested is because I never go to doctors. I'm my own doctor. And I've been my own doctor for a long time now. I don't trust them. And as I say, I don't trust them because, for a lot of reasons, I don't trust them. I went one time, I had the most debilitating anxiety at one stage, and I went to the doctor and he gave me Xanax. And I had said I'm never ever going to take Xanax. I don't want medication. And I had this crippling anxiety. And he gave me Xanax, 10 Xanax to be exact. And I took the 10 Xanax. And when I had about 6 taken, I went back to him and I said, "Are they killing my emotions and feelings?" And he said, I don't know. He said, "Do they kill your emotions and feelings?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "Well, what the fuck are you giving them to me for then?" And we sort of fell out that day, but I lost all trust in the medical profession from that day on. And it was shortly after that then that Anthony Tony Brunelli actually, I was making videos despite my anxiety. Maybe that was a lot of the cause of my anxiety, but because I didn't treat the cause, I was trying to push through. But that, as I say, is for if I explained it in a previous podcast, I wasn't treating the cause. I was trying to push through. But it was Anthony that gave me the foundation for staying present, for learning how to control the mind. As I say, Anthony does transcendental meditation, and that's another huge variable in controlling your environment. Because breathing, if you're breathing and meditation, really is a huge variable in controlling your state. It's a huge variable in controlling the environment, is in controlling your physical and mental state. And that's why meditation is so good, so useful. But it was Anthony that started me with the meditation and the whole concept of staying present. But really, I found it very, very difficult how understanding. But that's for another podcast. Yeah. But that Anthony was my first mentor. And that was huge, let me tell you. That was huge. And way better than any medication, and way better than anything, because my anxiety was so bad that time, I was going to throw myself, I was on my 2 knees, I was going to throw myself into the river. It was so bad, my head was going to burst. Anyway, anyway, um, yeah, where were we? Yeah. So that's why I'm my own doctor. I'm my own doctor. I don't trust the fuckers. And I don't trust them because they're now seeking to capitalise on this coronavirus. That's what people do. They, you know, they they masquerade as our saviours, but they're operating in their own interest, masquerading as our saviours. And we're their own save us. Yeah. Yeah. So here is my opinion on curing coronavirus. First of all, fear lowers your immune system. Knowledge is power. So hopefully this knowledge that I'm giving you in this podcast here today will alleviate your fear. Now, my first suggestion is stop eating for 72 hours. Intermittent fasting is very, very important in controlling your environment. It allows your body to clean itself out. Intermittent fasting is very important for any autoimmune disease, for your general well-being is intermittent fasting. So if you have suffer from any autoimmune disease, Lyme's disease, autism, cancer, intermittent fasting is is hugely beneficial in treating this or anything like this. So the first thing I'm suggesting is to stop eating for 72 hours and let the body clean itself out. Give the body a chance to reset itself. Gives the brain a chance to clean out, the body a chance to autophagy it's called. It gives the chance a chance for the body to waste management, to clean itself. So the first thing I'm suggesting is stop eating for 72 hours. The second thing then I'm suggesting is 4,000 milligrams of vitamin C a day. So I took 2,000 milligrams in the morning and 2,000 milligrams in the evening, and it started to clear up within the first day. Now, in order to take your vitamin C, I suggest don't use tap water, because tap water is full of fluoride, and I never drink tap water. It's full of fluoride, and you really want to be keeping fluoride out of your system. As I say, it's one of the variables when it comes to controlling your emotional and physical state. So what I suggest is mineral water. Now, if you can afford it, use mineral water from glass bottles, but I'm not in a position where I can afford it. So I have to drink the plastic bottles, because these are heat-treated plastic bottles. So if you really want to do the thing right, use glass bottles. But as I say, mineral water, because another reason why I suggest mineral water is because they're higher in minerals than normal water, than even processed water. So make sure it's mineral water. I use this sparkling water, and mineral water is higher in minerals. For instance, a lot higher in magnesium and potassium, but a lot higher in magnesium, which is very good for the central nervous system. So I'm suggesting take your vitamin C and drink plenty of mineral water to flush your system, but not too much. As I say, a bottle in the morning and a bottle in the evening, along with to flush out your system with your vitamin C. So that's my second tip, is mineral water. Now what you want to do, and that'll boost your immune system. So as I say, not eating for the 72 hours will give your body a chance to reset, give your body a chance to clear out. And then what you want to do is increase boost your immune system. So the 4,000 milligrams of vitamin C will boost your immune system. Now it's a little bit hard on the bowels, because it'll safe, but it's better than suffering. It's better than dying, isn't it? The next thing I suggest is Actimel. These little Actimel shots are very good, but when it comes to drinking these little Actimel shots, make sure you get the sugar-free ones. This is a fruit and veg cultured shot, but this is the no sugar one. And no sugar one. It's very important to get the no sugar one, because viruses love sugar. Any virus loves sugar. Cancer loves sugar. Um, Cancer cells love sugar. Um, Viruses love sugar. Cancer cells love sugar. You know, a lot of these autoimmune diseases and different infections are caused by an imbalance in the immune system, an imbalance in the body, and a mineral imbalance. So no sugar, stay away from sugar. And that's why I'd say what you're doing when you're stockpiling all this shit that you're eating. For instance, I was in the shop this morning and I seen all these cereals for sale. Breakfast cereals are full of sugar, so you're stockpiling all this processed shit, and all this processed shit is very, very hard on your whole system, very hard on your immune system. Your body has to clear out all this processed shit, and it has enough to be doing. So what you want to be doing is eating a diet very high in antioxidants. So lots of fruit and vegetables, like coloured fruits, like peppers, raspberries, cherries, walnuts is very good for the brain. Eggs is very good for the brain. But these foods high in antioxidants, broccoli is the superfood. Broccoli is an excellent food. So diet high in antioxidants, lots of fruit and veg, especially berries, raspberries, blueberries, cherries, strawberries, berries, lots of berries for real high antioxidants. So what I suggest as well, while we're on about the berries, is what I find great is this concentrated cherry juice. Now, the concentrated cherry juice, again, you can it says 2 spoons a day in the mineral water, but I obviously in the current climate I'm taking the concentrated cherry twice a day, because it's a really, really great antioxidant. Now, as I say, a lot of autoimmune diseases and a lot of diseases are caused by a mineral imbalance in the body. And what you need when you're sick is vitamins. And what I suggest for your vitamins is this organic black seed oil, this cumin seed oil. Now, this cumin seed oil is absolutely superb. As I have explained, we're all made of stars, and so we're all composed of the elements. And this here has the A to Z of minerals in it. And that's why this is magnificent for curing any autoimmune disease. It's a huge variable in curing any autoimmune disease, any infections, anything where you need vitamins. This has the full A to Z of minerals. And this really, really is great for balancing the minerals in the body, and it's a really, really great antioxidant as well. And this is a super, super, super product to buy. Black cumin seed oil. So I really highly recommend this in the current climate, or for anybody who's sick. This is really super stuff. And mushrooms. Mushrooms are very, very high in antioxidants, really high in antioxidants. Lots of mushrooms, lots of chaga, lion's mane is really brilliant for the brain. Lion's mane is brilliant for the brain, brilliant for connectivity in the brain. Anybody with any autoimmune disease, lion's mane, chaga, oyster mushrooms. Oysters are brilliant for any autoimmune disease. So in the current climate, anybody who feels they might be sick, mushrooms are a superb food to be buying. Chaga, oysters, shiitake, mushrooms, lads. Lots of mushrooms. Now, so that goes through a few of the supplements. Now, for those of you, then we'll look at another little thing I'll suggest here is this tea tree essential oil. Now, what I've done is you put the basin down and you boil up the kettle boil up the kettle, and so that's hot water in the basin, really, really boiling water into the basin. Put the towel over the head, we all know the crack, and plenty tea tree oil into the water. Don't be shy with it. And put the towel over the head then, and it'll give you the tea tree oil and the steam will hit you such a blast in the face. It's like a furnace on your face, so it's great for your skin, but it goes into the lungs. The tea tree oil is like a sledgehammer into the chest, and it goes right deep into the lungs, and the first thing you say to yourself is, oh my God, what am I doing to myself? Oh, this, get me out of here. And all sorts of thoughts go through your head. But what I was thinking is, what Marcus Aurelius says, if you can endure it, endure it. If you can endure it, endure it. And just stay under. And endure it, and take in these deep breaths. And after a few minutes, it'll calm down, and just take in good deep breaths of the tea tree oil and the steam, and it'll start to clear your whole chest, clear all your skin, pores will start dropping out of your face, and stay under. And this will do wonders. And this will go a long way towards treating it. Now, the next tip I'm going to give you is absolutely massive. What I've just told you so far should be sufficient to cure you. It most certainly cured me. But in the case that, for instance, I suppose the best way to put it is, if you want to declare war on this, the best way, the way if you're addicted to drugs or something like that. So when you try to come off the drugs, that the body craves it. The body craves it because the cells cry out. Because, for instance, we'll take heroin. Heroin docks in the same receptors as oxytocin. So when you come off the heroin, those cells determine the nature of change. They cry out for more heroin, and they cry out. Then the government capitalise on this by switching you from heroin to methadone. So that's they again, as I say, they seek to capitalise on this rather than treat the cause. But the best way to treat this is to take the best way to cure this, in other words, so that you don't suffer withdrawals, the best thing to do is to take 100 to 150 milligrams of niacin. That depending on your size, obviously. Women take 100 grams of niacin. The bigger men, for instance myself, I would take 150 milligrams of niacin. Jump on a rebounder for 20 minutes. Now, if you can't get a rebounder, or in the event that's an old person and they can't jump on a rebounder, as this is affecting the old people, put them on a vibration plate. A vibration plate will work as well. You know the lads you stand on in the gym, the lad that rattles you for 20 minutes. So take 100 to 150 milligrams of niacin, which increases the blood flow. Stand on your rebounder and jump up and down for 20 minutes on your rebounder, the small trampolines, or else stand on a vibration plate for 20 minutes. And this puts the niacin throughout the whole system, and you start to sweat. Then get into a sauna for 40 minutes, and then take activated charcoal. The activated charcoal is very, very important, because when you take the niacin and then you go into the sauna, you burst all the fat cells, and if you don't take the activated charcoal, the fat that comes out of the cells will go to your brain, and it's very hard to get fat off the brain. So it's very important that you take, if you're going to do this to complete the whole process, take the activated charcoal. The activated charcoal is very, very important at the end. Now, seeing as I don't have any coronavirus patients to try this on, and we can't get any sauna is open, what I suggest is take your 100 to 150 milligrams of niacin, get into a really hot bath, as hot as you can possibly stick, and keep it hot for your 40 minutes. A really hot bath, because you will do some sweating in a hot bath with the niacin, let me tell you. And a really, really, really hot bath, and then take your activated charcoal. And I can assure you, every toxin in your body will leave your body. And I can't, as I say, I don't have a coronavirus patient to try it with. I told you how I cured my condition, whatever it was. I don't have a label for, I don't have a diagnosis for it. I told you what I do with mine. But that virus, I can assure you, will pack a suitcase. If you follow that process, that virus will pack a suitcase. And as I say, that's how the Scientologists are treating drug addiction. That's how the Scientologists are treating drug addiction. And that's what's bringing everybody to Scientology. They're curing the drug addicts, they're picking on the weak, but that's some very useful information for you now. Yeah. So that's everything. Objective reality, I think. That's my thing on objective reality. My opinion on the cause of the coronavirus. Why they're concentrating on the symptoms and not concentrating on the cause. And my suggested cure. Now, I don't want any money for I'm not seeking to capitalise on my knowledge. I'm giving it to you free. But if you feel you would like to find this information useful or in any way beneficial, feel free to make a donation to my charity of choice, which is the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation of Ireland. I've set up a donation thing on the page on my page. Yeah, so that's for today's podcast, and I'll do another one next week, because that's another thing I've learned from Blind Buy: quality, not quantity. So I'll spend the next week working on my next podcast, and I'll do another podcast next week, and I'll talk to you then. Yeah, I enjoyed that one, and I hope you did too. Good luck.